Good evening, everyone. This is Tom Copeland. Welcome. Let us get started. Coming to you from my home office in St. Paul, Minnesota. A couple inches of snow yesterday. Going to be 40 degrees for the rest of the week. So things are looking up. We are going to be talking about money management and retirement planning tonight. This is one of my favorite topics. If you have any questions as we're going along, post your questions under chat. And I will be monitoring that. And also, if you want to ask a question, since we're a small enough group and you want to unmute your microphone, that's fine. Just unmute yourself and ask a question that way if you'd like. I'll be pausing a couple times throughout, so you can wait to ask questions there verbally if you want, and we'll probably have a little time at the end as well. So we're going to be looking at how to better manage your money, how to increase your savings, how to understand the difference between acceptable and unacceptable debt, how to save money for retirement, how to identify the best IRA plans for you. We're going to help you better understand when to claim Social Security benefits, and we'll end by discussing financial goals in the context of a budget. If you have any questions after tonight, I'm happy to try to answer them. Here's my phone number. Here is my email address. You will have a copy, be able to get a copy of these PowerPoint slides if you'd like afterwards. I don't charge anything for answering questions, so I'm happy to do it. Your questions might be answered on my website, tomcopelandblog.com. And by the way, I've been getting a lot of questions today and over the weekend about this new change in the Small Business Administration loan program regarding the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program. And we're still waiting for the SBA to issue some guidance on this, which I hoped would come today. I hope it's going to come tomorrow, that allow you to use your gross income when applying for the PPP money rather than your net income. And that will significantly increase how much you can get from the PPP. So as soon as there's some new clarification on this officially from the SBA, I will be writing about it on my website. Also on Facebook. Every time I post an article on my website, it will appear on my Facebook page. So you can ask me questions on Facebook. I've written a book, Family Childcare Money Management and Retirement Guide, which goes into great detail things that I'm talking about this evening. I am not providing you with legal, tax, or professional advice. So let us get started with this. Managing your money. So most family childcare providers are not making a ton of money. If you thought you were going to make $1 million by doing childcare, well, you need to think again, because that's probably not going to happen. Most people have not saved very much for an emergency fund, and that's the problem. Many providers have thousands of dollars of credit card debt. That's a problem. Very few providers are saving on a regular basis for their retirement. When I did a survey in the course of writing my book, I found that fewer than half of the providers had made a contribution to their IRA in the last year. Now, some providers are doing well financially. So I've talked to several providers who make over $100,000 a year. So it's not that everybody's poor, but regardless of how much money you're making, my experience is that everybody could do a little bit better job in how they manage their money, regardless of how much money they have. So the first step in managing your money, in my opinion, is to get control over your spending. Now, I should say at the start here that I'm not your financial advisor. You don't have to agree with what I'm saying. I will spell out some rules regarding individual retirement accounts and Social Security. But other than that, I'm giving you my opinion. So you can disagree with me if you want. Assuming that you're not making a ton of money, in my experience, the first thing to do is to look at your spending. Why? If you just said, well, Tom, I'm not making a whole lot of money, so I need to increase my income. Well, maybe you do, maybe. But if you think about it, when you graduated from high school, maybe you're making a little bit of money. Graduated from college, maybe you're making a little bit more. And now maybe you're making more. But I assume it's also true that your spending went up as well. So just increasing your income without paying attention to your spending, I don't think it's a good idea. Because for most people, when their income goes up, their spending goes up. So we need to look at expenses. What I would suggest as a first exercise is to track your expenses for a month and put them under one of these two headings: fixed expenses or flexible expense. A fixed expense is something that you really don't have control over or much control over. Mortgage payments, property tax, gas, insurance of all kinds, car loan interest, credit card payments, utilities. All right, you got to spend those things. Flexible expenses you have some control over: food, clothing, gas, vacation, entertainment, cable TV, charitable contributions, hobbies, and so on. Everybody's list of expenses, fixed and flexible, could well be different. If I was creating this list, I would put under flexible expenses books, because I like to buy books. One provider said she would have a category of shoes because she spends a lot of money on shoes. So what we're talking about here is we need to know where your money is going. Where are you spending money? After you do this, we're going to do several things. First, we're going to look and say, well, is your spending higher than your income? I mean, if that's the case, you can't sustain that. Now, we're in the middle of a pandemic, so this may be very difficult now. But in general, right, your spending has to be less than your income. And what most people do is spend money on the things they have to, spend money on flexible things. And at the end of the month, most people don't have any savings. And that's why most people aren't saving, because they're considering savings the lowest priority. So the first step in this exercise, in my opinion, is to set a modest savings goal. $50 a month, $100 a month, something that you'll be able to do month after month. And let's say it's $50 a month. You make that a fixed expense. You put that at the top of your fixed expenses and make a point of writing out a check for the $50 or whatever and put it in a safe bank savings account somewhere. And then you start spending money. And if at the end of the month you start running out of money, you have to cut something on the flexible side. Well, it's whatever you want to cut. If it's me, I'm not cutting my books. I'll cut food, I'll cut eating out, I'll cut entertainment, but I don't want to cut my books. I'd like to spend money on books. So it's up to you. So we want to establish a savings habit. Next, we want to look at your spending and say to yourself, does your spending does reflect in some way your values? And is where you're spending your money accurately reflecting your values? In other words, would you change something about your spending to bring it more in line with your own values? Let me give you an example of what I mean here. Years ago, my wife and I used to live in a large 6-bedroom Victorian house that we bought years ago very cheaply. It needed a lot of fixing up, and we enjoyed fixing it up, and it was great. Now, it was just my wife and I, 6 bedrooms. We didn't need 6 bedrooms, but it was a great house. Well, as I was working on my book and I was traveling, I was reading another book called Your Money or Your Life. Your Money or Your Life. It's an excellent book about how you spend your time, how you spend money, and how it matches up with what's important in your life. And when I looked at that, when I was reading that book rather, I said to myself, well, what's important to me now? And at that time, we were spending, at least $1,000 or more per year fixing up our old house. Now, we enjoyed doing it, but suddenly as I was reading this book, I realized, do I want to spend the next $1,000 on fixing up our house? And I thought to myself, no. What's more important to me then was taking a longer vacation, retiring earlier. So I thought, well, that means we should sell our house. That's not where our values are anymore in terms of our money. So I went home and I said to my wife, I think we should sell our house because I think there are more important things we'd rather spend our money on. And she said, I think we should sell our house because it's too big. We don't need 6 bedrooms. So we sold our house. We downsized to a 1-story 1950s Rambler, 3 bedrooms, attached garage, lower property values, lower heating costs. We just save money. So your values can change throughout your life, and that could change how you want to spend your money. But most people aren't thinking, I don't think, carefully enough about what's important and then how we're spending our money. Now, at the end, we'll talk about setting financial goals. All right? All right. Next. Forget if I have a slide about this. No. When you go back to the categories of how you're spending money, the 3 things under the fixed category that you probably can get more control over easier than the others are car loan interest and credit card interest. Did I say 3? Car loan interest, credit card interest. Those are the things that I think of right now. Why? Those, you're paying interest. And in general, you don't want to pay interest on things. In general, you want to try to pay off car loan interest, pay off credit card interest. And so that's where I would try to attack as well when you're trying to keep your fixed expenses as low as possible. I have a handout on my website. If you search car loan, you'll see a handout about how to create a car fund. You should be looking towards paying cash ultimately for cars. Maybe it'll take you a while to get there, but in general, you should move towards paying a larger and larger down payment each time you buy a car so that you're eventually paying cash for the car. And you should be paying off credit card debt as well. All right? Okay, so that's that first exercise. Now, our culture encourages spending, not savings, right? When's the last time you saw an ad on television that said, are you thinking about spending money today? Stop. Don't do it. This message is brought to you by who? Who's going to pay money for an ad to tell you not to spend money? So we're told, well, we can just buy it on credit. We should just buy stuff. Well, in a family childcare setting, sometimes some providers spend money on the children in their care as an expression of their love. And I think that's a mistake. You can obviously, and you do, obviously express your love in many ways, right? You tell kids you love them, you give them a hug, you tell them how great they are. You encourage them. You are expressing love for the children. But if you're buying even little things, little trinkets, little treats, little stuff, and giving them to kids as an expression of love, that's a mistake. As a substitute for love, that's a mistake. Parents are not asking you to spend more money on their kids. So I would think twice. If you need to buy toys because you need to buy toys, okay, great. But don't buy stuff just to give to kids all the time. In some cases, spending on children can be excessive. One provider said she had so much stuff in her house, she didn't even know what she had anymore. And one day she went to the store and bought something for the kids and came home and realized that she'd already bought it before. You know, she had so much stuff, she didn't know what she had. So she decided, uh-oh, that was a sign. And now she said she did a big cleaning on her house to make sure that she knew what she had so she didn't have to buy it again. I spend so much money on books for so many years that I keep my own lists on my phone of the books that I have, so that when I'm out shopping for a book, I remember, I'll look it up to see whether I have it or not. You don't want to spend money to meet an emotional need. People tell us if you're hungry, you don't want to go shopping for food because you'll buy more food. If you're depressed, you don't want to go shopping to try to relieve your depression. Because any purchase, any spending will only meet an emotional need for a very, very short period of time. Think of the last time you bought something that you thought was really, really terrific. A big screen color TV, I don't know, something that you were just thrilled, totally thrilled about when you bought it. How long did that thrill last? Probably not very long. So again, if you need to buy something, okay, fine. But don't look to spending as a way to satisfy emotions. If you think about all the ads you see on TV, even the ads you'll see in the newspapers or magazines or online, usually the ad is making an appeal to our emotions. When you look at ads for television, when you look on television for ads for cars, the purpose of the car is to get you from one place to the other. But you won't see that in any car ad. The car ads will show cars in the mountains, on the ocean, you know, they'll talk about freedom and excitement and emotions, but not by the function of the car. All right. So we're taught to, we're appealed to buy things on emotional reasons. And I'm just saying we got to be aware of that. Now, you may say, Tom, I don't have a whole lot of money to save, particularly during this financial crisis that we're in. Okay, I understand. However, maybe it'll take a while for things to calm down. But in any case, what we're talking about is true no matter what the current financial situation. In other words, small amounts of savings add up. If you saved $10, $5 a day, 5 days a week, you'll have $1,250 by the end of the year. If you invest that money in an IRA that earns 8% a year, I'm not saying it will, but I'm just using that as an example. In 10 years, that $1,200 will turn into $19,000. I mean, you got to be saving it each year for 10 years, sorry. It'll turn into $19,000. So even small amounts of money will grow. Savings is about saving small amounts of money over a long period of time. That's where it'll get you where you want to go. When I did my book, I asked providers in surveys what they did about saving money. Some providers said they had parents bring business supplies so that they didn't have to spend as much money on supplies. Some providers said, one provider said to me, she used to have this gigantic, wonderful, fancy birthday parties. But then she realized she was spending a lot of money on those birthday parties. So she decided to change things. And she told parents, here's now a list of all the things we need for birthday parties this year. And everybody needs to pick one of the things on this list that they're going to bring to the party. Somebody's going to bring the cake, somebody's going to bring the decorations, somebody's going to bring the juice, and so on. And she said all the parents were willing to do it because they knew that their child was going to get a nice party as well. And as a result, this provider said she didn't spend another dime on birthday parties. Another provider said, if I get a windfall, I will save that money, I won't spend it. A windfall is something in which you get some money that you didn't anticipate. When the year began, you didn't realize you were going to get that. And so you didn't have any plans to spend it. Therefore, I would suggest you want to save it. And in particular, you could save it for retirement if you want. There are places on the internet you can go to get all kinds of tips about saving money. The Frugal Shopper, simpleliving.net. I'm not telling you to go to the extreme. I'm not telling you you can never buy flowers again in your life or never go to the movies. No, no, no. But most providers are spending more money than they should or need to. Another provider said, when I'm out there looking for stuff to buy for my business, before I buy it, I will ask myself the question, if I bought this, will this improve my business? Will it improve the quality of my business? Or will it entice parents to my program? Or will it not matter? So she does a check on herself before spending money. Hey, if it's not going to improve my business or attract parents to my program, then do I really need to buy this thing? And I thought that was a nice way of trying to control spending. We all might have our own little tricks about how to control spending. One of mine is whenever I go to the ATM to get some cash to put in my wallet, I won't take out more than $40. Why? Because I don't want more than $40 in my wallet. Because if I'm out spending money and I'm paying out cash, once I start running down on cash, I'm less likely to spend the money. If I had hundreds of dollars in my wallet all the time, I'm sure I would spend more. And I'm sure that's true for most people. So I don't need the temptation to have more money. And when I start running out of money, that means I need to go to the bank to get some more money. And it helps me think about it. If I'm going to the bank too much, I think, well, why am I spending so much money? Short-term savings goals. If you're going to save some money, the next thing to think about is, when do you need this money that you're saving? And right now, we're going to talk about short-term goals, saving for something you need in the next 1 to 5 years. And it might mean creating an emergency fund, or buying a car, or making a down payment on a home, or making a home improvement, right? You need it within 1 to 5 years. If that's the case, you don't want to take a lot of risk. You don't want to take much of any risk of where you're putting the money, because you're going to need it right away. So you're looking for a place to preserve the money. You don't want to lose the value of the money. And you want to have it readily accessible. In the case of an emergency, you want to be able to get that money today. Well, here are 4 options of where you might put money if you need it in the next 1 to 5 years. A bank savings account, well, it's earning hardly anything now, less than 0.5%, right? You're not going to earn much interest in a bank savings account. It's no risk. It's insured. Your money in a bank is insured. Very, very low return. There's no penalty for taking it out whenever you want. It's insured, as I said. You could invest, not invest is not the right word. You can put the money in your local bank savings account, or you can go online. There are online banks that will give you probably a higher rate of interest. Go look at ingdirect.com for more information about an online bank savings account. The next thing you might look at is a money market fund. Again, the interest rate is very low, less than 1%. Very low risk. There is some risk, but it's extremely low. There's no penalty for taking the money out early. Deposits are not insured. Third option, a certificate of deposit, a CD. You can get a CD for 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. The longer you get the CD for, the higher the interest rate, but still the interest is not going to be very high, maybe 1.5%, higher than a money market or a bank. There's no risk on a CD. It's insured. A little bit higher return. There is, however, in general, an early withdrawal penalty. You could check to see whether that's the case, but usually there's a penalty for taking it out earlier. Because if you get a 5-year CD, that means you're supposed to keep that money in for 5 years and not take it out before then. Lastly, there's what's called a short-term bond fund. Again, low risk. All of these options are low risk. Get a little higher return. There's no penalty for taking the money out early. It's not insured. 3%, I don't know, 2 to 3% now maybe. So, what do you choose? Well, money market funds and short-term bond funds are more flexible with a higher rate of return compared to these other options. If you don't need money for at least a year, a CD or short-term bond fund can give you a little bit higher rate of return. But in general, for these short-term goals, you're really just looking to preserve the money. You're not looking at trying to make the highest interest rate you can, because that's secondarily important. You don't want to choose any other option of putting your money when you need it within 5 years. In other words, you do not want to put this kind of money in a stock market for buying stocks or individual bonds. No, no, too risky, just too risky. All right, next section, getting out of debt. In my opinion, remember, everything I'm saying is my opinion, there's acceptable debt and unacceptable debt. My father would always say to me, there's only 3 things that you should borrow money for: a house, an improvement on your home, and education. Because over many years, those things tend to increase in value. In general, your house is going to increase in value over the years. And having a home improvement increases the value of your home. The more education you have in general, the more ability you'll have to earn more money over your lifetime. Everything else that you buy will tend to decrease in value. And I would call that unacceptable debt. Why? Because you're paying for something that's going down in value. This is particularly true of a car. When you buy a car and drive it off the lot, the value of it drops dramatically. When you buy anything else, if you bought a chair, a couch, and then drove around the block and returned it and said, now I want to return it, it's worth less. It's worth less. Something used is worth a lot less than something that's new. Well, what this means is you should be paying cash for everything except a home improvement, and education. That's the goal. That should be a long-term goal. Credit card debt. If you aren't able to pay off your credit cards in full at the end of each month, I believe that's a sign of overspending. You're spending too much. Now, I know we're still in the middle of a pandemic, but this is still true. The interest rates on credit cards, 15 to 20%, will make it extremely difficult, if not impossible, to save. If you looked back at how much interest you paid on credit cards in 2020, imagine that money could have been used for meeting a short-term goal or for retirement savings. Having a high monthly balance that you're not paying off means your credit rating is worse. You're going to pay higher interest if you take out a loan on a car. You're going to pay higher mortgage interest and higher interest on a home equity loan. It's like you're being hit twice. You're paying all these extra costs in interest, and it's hurting you every time you borrow for anything else. Here's an example. When I did the survey for my book, the average balance on providers who had credit card debt was about $5,000 balance on their card. Well, if your credit card has a $5,000 balance and you're paying 18% in interest, and you make only the $100 minimum monthly payment, it'll take you 30 years to pay off the $5,000, and you would have paid over $17,500. I mean, it's insane. It's just insane. A financial planner once said to me, he said, Tom, when I go out socially and meet people and they learn that I'm a financial planner, they will usually always ask me, hey, what's a tip? Give me a financial tip. And he said, my answer is always pay off your credit card debt. He said, I won't even take on a new client until they've paid off their credit card debt. Because if you think about it, paying 15 to 20% interest on credit cards, you'll never earn that kind of interest over any period of time when you invest money for your retirement. And so you're just hurting yourself. You're making it much more difficult to save for retirement. So how do we start? If you've got credit card debt, try not to go further into debt. Try to say, all right, my things I'm buying this coming month, I'll pay off at least those things in full, and I won't go in further into debt if I can. Now, this might mean cutting some other flexible expenses. You may want to throw away retail store credit cards. Studies indicate that if you have, let's say, a Target credit card, you're more likely to spend more money when you're shopping at Target than if you paid by check or cash. So one way to try to reduce debt, in particular credit card debt, is to not use retail credit cards. My wife and I each have an individual credit card, a joint credit card, and a Target credit card. That's it. You may want to shop around for a better interest rate on your credit cards, and you could go to creditcards.com or bankrate.com. And if you are paying a really high rate, maybe you can get a lower rate by going there. If you're using debit cards, these cards act like checks because you got to pay them off right away. And that's good, but just beware of overdraft fees, right? I mean, if you don't pay them off immediately, you get charged this interest and overdraft. You want to avoid all that. What else? There's a debtreductionservices.org. It's a nonprofit organization that can provide a lot of advice and help around paying off debt. There's no rule about this, about prioritizing debt. Some people would say, pay down the highest interest rate first. In other words, pay off your credit cards before you pay off your car loan or student loan or mortgage. All right? Fine. Other people say, pay off the smallest debt first. So I don't know what, maybe I don't know which would be the smallest. Maybe your car loan is the smallest loan. And the idea here is pay that off first, because you'll be able to pay it off faster. And that will give you an incentive to feel stronger about paying off the next one. Everybody's a little bit different about this, so there's no rule about this. You definitely want to pay off your credit card debt before you try to pay off mortgage or pay down your mortgage faster. No. Credit card debt is always more important to pay off than a mortgage. What about the option of paying off credit card debt versus contributing to an IRA? Tom, I got $1,000. Should I pay off my credit card debt or should I contribute that to an IRA? Well, there are pros and cons here. Paying off the credit card debt means you're eliminating that high interest, but you're then taking longer to start contributing to an IRA. And the longer you wait to contribute to an IRA, the less you're going to have in retirement. If you put the full $1,000 to the IRA, great, but now you're paying that really, really high interest rate on credit cards. So now what? Again, there's no right or wrong. I would probably say do a little bit of each. You want the advantage of this IRA contribution that we'll talk about in a minute. You also want to pay off some of that credit card. There are credit counseling services if you need more help. They can help you negotiate with creditors, get lower interest rates. I would go through your United Way and ask for them to give you the names of credit counseling services in your area. All right, so now let's talk more specifically about money for retirement. And let me pause here to see if people have any questions. Anybody? All right. So it's never too late to start saving for your retirement, even if it means taking very small steps now. Money grows over time. Here's an example. Faye starts saving for her retirement when she's 35. She puts aside $2,000 a year for 10 years. That means she's contributed $20,000 for her retirement. Let's say her retirement money earns 8% each year. When she's 65, 30 years later, she'll have $135,000. Fred, her brother, waits to save until he's 45. He starts contributing $2,000 a year, and he puts aside $2,000 a year for 20 years. So he saved $40,000. He turns 65 the same year as Faye does. They're twins. His money earned 8% over 20 years. And after 30 years, he's only got $91,000. He saved twice as much money. His money earned the same interest as Faye, but he has a third less because he waited 10 years. Every year that you wait before you start contributing to your IRA makes a big difference. So start now. When's the best day to contribute to retirement? Today. When's the next best day? Tomorrow. We don't care what the stock market is doing. We don't care about anything else in the world except today is better than tomorrow to start saving money. Well, where do you find the money to save? You want to develop the savings habit that I mentioned earlier by putting aside some money each month for retirement, even if it's a small amount. A savings habit, getting into the habit of saving will get you there. One provider said to me, Tom, at the beginning of the year, I pick out one of the children in my care and I identify that child as my retirement baby, meaning all the money I get from that child is going into my retirement. Another provider said, I put the food program check towards retirement, or half my food program check. Another provider said, I make sure I make direct deposits into my retirement account. Most people say there are two kinds of people in the world, spenders and savers, and that savers tend to marry spenders and spenders tend to marry savers. And the leading cause of divorce is money. Well, my wife and I got married a long time ago, and at that time I was the saver and she was the spender. And she didn't want to have anything to do with the money, and you know, I would say, okay, we need to put some money into this fund, into that fund, and she just didn't want to deal with any of that. So I said, okay, can we just have money taken out of your check and directly deposited into a retirement account? She said, great, so that she wouldn't even have to think about it. I like to think about it, so I'm into it, but she's not. What else? If you get any extra money, right? A windfall, a tax refund, something else, that's another way to try to find money for retirement. Money you don't expect to get. You want to try to invest as early in the year as possible. In other words, now, March 1st, is the time to be putting money aside for your 2021 retirement account. Most people use this time of the year to put aside money into their 2020 retirement. So no, the earlier in the year you put money aside in retirement, think about it, the longer it's going to have to earn more interest. Money you deposit in January into your retirement fund is going to earn more interest than money you deposit in December. And over many years, that can make a difference. So don't wait till the end of the year or the beginning of the next year. Start putting money aside early in each year if you can. This idea of putting money aside at the beginning of the month is the idea of paying yourself first before you spend money on something else. Providers who put a little bit of money aside at the beginning of the month don't miss it. It's like, you know, they weren't saving before, but they just took some of that flexible money and decided to put it into savings, and they didn't miss it. Think back 10, 15 years when you were making a lot less money, right? Did you miss the spending that you're doing now? I don't think so. As is probably obvious, most people, including most providers, are not saving enough for their retirement. How much are you going to need? Well, experts say you'll need about 70 to 80% of your current income in retirement. In other words, if you want to have the same standard of living that you have today in retirement, you'll need about 70 to 80% of the money you have now. And we're talking about profit, your profit. Women in general will need to have saved more money than men because women will live longer. My mother is 96. My father lived to be 85. My mother-in-law is 92. Women over time tend to earn less money than men, and therefore their Social Security benefits are generally lower than men. And that means they'll need to rely more on money they've saved themselves. Women in general have more medical expenses over their lifetime than men do because women tend to live long. There are calculators out there that you can use to estimate how much saving you're going to need for retirement. The one that I like is called choosetosave.org. There are a number of them. That's a simple one. You're putting in information about how old you are, when are you going to retire, how much money have you saved so far. You put in a bunch of things, and it'll tell you how much you need to save each month now to meet the goal for retirement. Now, if you're using these calculators, they can be intimidating because you'll get to the end and it'll say, oh my gosh, I need to save $1,000 a month. I can't possibly do that. So you just need to kind of relax about this a little bit, because you can play with these numbers. You can decide to work a little bit longer or decide to live on less. That's what most people do. Why is it that we see a lot of people of retirement age saying to us, welcome to Walmart? Because they are people who are probably receiving Social Security, but still need to work because Social Security wasn't enough for them to live on in retirement. The sooner you get an idea of how much you should be saving for retirement, I think, the more likely that you will be to start saving for retirement. Don't look at the conclusion of these calculators and think it's hopeless. It's not hopeless. Saving a little bit now is better than saving nothing now. You also want to take responsibility for your own retirement. Particularly if you're a woman, it's highly likely that there'll come a time in your life where you will be the only person responsible for money, for dealing with money. So you should try to educate yourself about this. Think about this as lifetime learning. It's not something you have to master in the next year or two. I would suggest to you that you do not want to invest your money in something that you don't understand. If you don't understand where your money is, your money shouldn't be there. So take the money out, put it in the savings account until you understand where your money is going and what it's doing there. The best book to start with in dealing with money, in my opinion, is called Personal Finance for Dummies. It's a really, really good book about money and a basic foundation in money. And anything this guy has ever written, Eric Tyson, is great. He's written books on retirement and IRAs, and they're all on Amazon. You might want to take a financial planning class offered by your local community college or library. You might want to join an investment club. There are also lots of resources on the internet. So let's talk about individual retirement accounts. The vast majority of the money that you're saving for your retirement outside of Social Security should be in what's called an IRA, an individual retirement account. It's not an investment. It doesn't earn interest. It's a law that allows you to claim tax benefits for investing money in your retirement, which allows you to defer paying taxes for many, many years. And this creates a big tax incentive. You can invest money in almost anything for retirement. You can put money in stocks, in bonds, in real estate, just about anything. Once you've invested money someplace, you then label it your IRA. In other words, you pick a company, Vanguard. They got all kinds of different funds. You pick one of them. I like this one. And then it'll ask you, what do you want to call this? I want to call it my IRA. Which kind of IRA? And you tell them which one you want to call it as an IRA. So you've just labeled the fund that you're putting your money in as your IRA. How does this work? You make a contribution. You got $1,000. You put it wherever you want here. You can invest it in almost anything. When you put the money in that fund, you're going to get a tax deduction. It'll save money on your current tax return, with the exception of a Roth IRA. That money, that $1,000, stays in there. Money you put in an IRA, you should say to yourself, I will not take it out until I'm ready to retire, whether that's 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years. You want to make that commitment because there's serious penalties for taking money out before then. So I'm going to leave it in there for a long time. And each year, it'll earn some interest. When you're ready to retire, or as early as age 59 and a half, you take the money out. And at that time, you'll pay tax on what you took out or what you put in, the contribution, and you'll pay tax on the interest that it earned over that time. You get a tax deduction now. You wait many, many years before you pay taxes on it. And this is a significant, significant tax break, the biggest tax break you'll get in your life. If you invest $5,000 a year for 20 years and it earns 8%. Now, I keep using the example 8%. That doesn't mean your fund that you're investing in is going to earn 8%. Last year, it earned a lot more than that. There's no guarantee, okay? But just as an example, if instead of labeling your investment an IRA, you just put it in there, you'd have $129,000 after taxes. But if you had labeled that fund your IRA, you would have had $164,000 after taxes. Plus, there was that tax benefit of contributing $5,000 a year. There's a significant difference in putting money, investing for retirement within an IRA versus outside of an IRA. That's why the vast majority of your retirement savings should be invested through an IRA. Let's talk about the major IRAs that are out there that you are probably eligible for. There's the regular IRA, also called the traditional IRA. You're eligible for this if you're married and filing jointly and your adjusted gross income is less than $124,000. If your spouse doesn't have a retirement plan at work, there's no income limitation and you're always eligible for a regular or traditional IRA. The maximum you can contribute is $6,000 per person. If you're age 50, an extra $1,000. These are the rules for 2020. Again, you get a tax deduction when you put that money in, save money now, pay taxes later. The next kind of IRA is called a simple IRA. There's no income eligibility limit, so everybody is eligible to put money into a simple IRA. The maximum contribution is $13,500 and an extra $3,000 if you're age 50 or older. Again, tax deductible now, pay taxes later. One other thing about a simple IRA, if you have employees, depending on how long they work for you and how much you pay them, if you set up a simple IRA for yourself, you may have to contribute some money to your employees' simple IRA. It's not going to be a lot, but something. So if you have employees, check that out a little bit more before you set up a simple IRA. Next, a SEP IRA, a Simplified Employee Pension IRA. Again, no income eligibility limits. However, the maximum you can contribute is a little over 18% of your profit. So if your profit was $10,000, you could only contribute $1,800. And if your profit was $20,000, you could only contribute $3,600. So unless you have, I don't know, $70,000, $80,000 plus in profit, I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense to do a SEP IRA. A simple IRA allows you to contribute a lot more. So for the most part, I wouldn't pay attention to a SEP IRA. The last IRA is different than all the other ones. There is an income eligibility limit. If you're married and filing jointly, your adjusted gross income, meaning your profit plus your spouse's gross income, has to be less than $206,000. If you're single, your profit has to be less than $139,000. If you're single and your profit is more than $139,000, give me a call. I'm going to write a story about you. Congratulations. The maximum you can contribute is $6,000. Again, if you're age 50 or older, another $1,000. Now, here's the difference. When you put money into a Roth, you don't get a tax deduction. You're not putting it on your tax return. You're not reducing your taxable income. It earns interest. You can invest it in the same places you can invest any other IRA. When you get to be 59 and a half, you can start taking the money out if you want. But you won't pay tax on your contributions because you already paid tax on it. And you won't pay tax on the interest. And that's the big deal. You're giving up a tax benefit today to get a bigger tax benefit later. Now, if I said to you marshmallow study, would you know what I'm talking about? A marshmallow study, that was a study done with preschoolers starting in the 1960s, I think at Stanford University. They brought preschoolers into a room. They sat them in front of a table. They put a marshmallow in front of them and said, I'm going to leave the room. When I come back, if this marshmallow is still here, I'll give you another one. And they filmed it. And it's hilarious. Just Google marshmallow study. Why? Some of the kids ate that marshmallow in 5 seconds. Other kids licked it or smelled it. They put their head in their hands. It's hilarious. The person left the room for 90 seconds. They've been tracking these kids since the 1960s. One of the most significant findings was the kids who did not eat the marshmallow are significantly better off financially. They have more wealth. They're making more money. They're saving more money. What's going on? Why? One of the most significant, if not the most significant indicator of success in life is self-control, delayed gratification. Kids who had more self-control about not immediately satisfying themselves with the marshmallow had more likely had an outlook on life in the same way, that they would delay some gratification. And that's what people who invest in the Roth are doing. You're giving up a benefit now to get a bigger benefit later. So I really, really like the Roth. The Roth has some other benefits. You can take the money out earlier, depending on some other things, but essentially more flexibility in being able to take out the money earlier without penalty. You can contribute longer to a Roth than you can to other programs. Think about this. When you retire, all right, you start getting Social Security benefits. You're going to pay tax on most of those benefits. If you take money out of any other IRA, you're going to pay tax on that. If you take, if you earn any money, you're going to pay tax on that. If you get a pension, you're going to pay tax on that. So you could end up paying a bunch of taxes when you're retired. But if some of the money you have in retirement is a Roth IRA, you can now control things and start taking money out of a Roth to help keep your overall tax bracket lower, to help pay lower taxes overall. I just think you don't want to have to worry as much about taxes when you're retired. Well, given all these options, how do we choose what kind of IRA? Now, I didn't mention if your spouse or you used to work at a company that offered a retirement plan, a 401k plan, a 403b plan for nonprofits. If your spouse currently works for a company that offers a 401k plan and that employer makes some kind of match will contribute some money to the plan, 1% of salary, 2% of salary. In my opinion, the number one financial goal for your family is to make sure your spouse is contributing enough to his retirement to get the maximum match from the employer, because that's free money. To me, that's more important than anything else you can do. Next, if you've made enough of a contribution to get the maximum match, then in my opinion, the next thing you should do is set up a Roth IRA and contribute the maximum, if you can, to a Roth. If you still have more money you want to put aside for retirement, then you may want to make additional contributions to the 401k plan or set up a simple IRA. And the decision there will be based on the kind of options the employer plan offers and the management fees that they charge. Because the more fees that are being charged, the less likely you want to invest the money in that kind of fund. What else? Let me pause there. There are questions about these different types of IRAs. All right. A saver's credit. Here's a tax credit for low-income providers. It's a credit on top of the tax benefits of an IRA contribution. In other words, if you're married and filing jointly and your profit plus your spouse's gross income is less than $65,000, you're eligible. Or if you're single and your profit is less than $32,500, this is for 2020, you're eligible. The tax credit is based on how low your income is. It could be a 10%, 20%, or 50% tax credit, up to the first $2,000 of a contribution to an IRA. Congress passed this law many years ago to encourage lower income folks to contribute to their own retirement, to their own IRA. Because most people who now contribute to an IRA are middle or upper income folks. It's a double tax benefit. You get a tax credit and a tax deduction for any contribution except a Roth IRA. Somebody's asked me to elaborate a little bit more about IRAs. If you could be more specific about that question, that would help me. Not sure what you're asking.
Oh, when you mentioned the inside and the outside of one?
Oh.
That's what I mean. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. That's what I need.
No problem. Thank you.
So let me try to say it this way. You have $1,000. You could put the money wherever you want. You could savings account, a bank account, a money market fund. You could also buy some stocks, a stock fund. You could put it wherever you want. If you don't take advantage of the IRA rule, then you're going to pay tax on that. You're going to pay tax on any interest it earns. If, when you're investing it in a stock fund, and then say to the company that's offering that fund, this is my IRA, because they will allow you the option of choosing to call this money an IRA or not. I'm giving you my $1,000. I'm just giving it, I don't want it to be in a retirement. I want this to be in my emergency fund. So I'm not going to call it an IRA. Okay, fine. Or I'm putting the same $1,000 into that same fund, but now I want this to be an IRA. So now the company will say, okay, what kind of IRA are you going to have this to be? Is this going to be a regular IRA or a Roth IRA or a simple IRA? So you will just check off the box which one it is. And if you check the simple IRA box, that means you contribute a lot more than if it's a regular IRA or a Roth IRA. So you are just labeling the fund that you're putting the money in. So you can label it as an IRA and get the advantage of the tax consequences of that. Or if you don't label it as an IRA, you're not getting those tax benefits. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. So let's say something about Social Security. If you were here when I did my first session on tax consequences of COVID, I did say something about Social Security, but I do want, because I assume not everybody was here the first time around, and this is important, so I want to continue to say something about it. Social Security is only going to replace about, roughly speaking, 40% of what you're earning now. And remember, you're going to need 75 to 80% of what you're making now. So Social Security was not designed to be all you needed in retirement. And as I said before, many people are claiming Social Security benefits but still work. To qualify for Social Security, you have to be paying in taxes for at least 10 years. And you have to earn at least about $5,200 a year in profit to get credit for each of those 10 years. You can start claiming Social Security at age 62. Your full retirement age is either age 66 or 67, depending on when you were born. You want to go to the Social Security website, socialsecurity.gov, on this page to look at your annual statement. It will tell you whether you qualify to get Social Security. That is, have you worked 10 years? And it'll tell you how much you've earned every year over the course of your life. And it'll tell you how much you can expect to get from Social Security at age 62, your full retirement age, and age 70, which is the last year you can start claiming Social Security. You can use this Social Security estimator, this calculator, by plugging in numbers about how much you expect to earn between now and when you want to claim Social Security to get a more precise estimate of how much you will get from Social Security. So I urge everybody to go on socialsecurity.gov to every year to check on their statement to keep up to date on them. I then strongly recommend that people go to this other website, opensocialsecurity.com, which is an online calculator that will tell you when is the best time to claim Social Security. Should you claim Social Security earlier than your full retirement age? Well, ideally, you should wait. Ideally, you should wait until as long as you possibly can, ideally by age 70. If you claim Social Security benefits before your full retirement age and earn more than $18,960 for this year, 2021, your benefit will be slightly reduced. Maybe you still can't wait, okay, but you want to understand the consequences of claiming Social Security when you do. Many people don't realize the longer you wait to claim Social Security, the higher your benefit. And in particular, the years between your full retirement age and age 70, your Social Security benefit will go up by about 8% a year. That is a lot. That is a lot. So that's why you want to go to that opensocialsecurity.com, because that'll tell you the month and year you should claim Social Security to get the maximum benefit over the course of your life. Before you think about taking out Social Security, at least a year or two before then, I strongly recommend you use these calculators, you talk to Social Security, you talk to a financial planner, so you understand what's ahead of you when you should start claiming Social Security. Setting financial goals. Most people don't set financial goals. Most people spend more time planning the next vacation than they do planning for retirement. So people who set financial goals write them down, are much more likely to meet them than people who don't set them or don't write them down. Sounds simple, but it's really true. So here are an imaginary list of 7 financial goals. I'm making them up, and I'm putting them in a priority order, in my opinion. So the idea is that you would sit down with your spouse, significant other, we're early enough in the year, and say, what are our financial goals for 2021? You'd list them. Here are some examples. We want to contribute to our employer retirement plan to get the maximum employer match. We want to make sure we're having enough insurance. We want to get business liability insurance. Maybe we want to increase our car insurance. Paying off credit card debt, that's a goal. Establishing a 3-month emergency fund. Establishing a car replacement fund. Saving at least 10% of our profit for retirement. Saving for our child's college education. There could be others. You could say, I want to buy a boat. I want to take a big vacation. I want to whatever. All right. So you're brainstorming, listing a series of financial goals. To me, these are in a priority order. Why? In my opinion, saving for your child's college education is the lowest priority. Because unless you're taking care of the things above here, or at least starting to take care of them, I don't think you can afford to help your child through college. When you're ready to retire, can you go to your local bank and say, I'm about to retire. I'd like to take out a retirement loan. Are they going to give you a loan for retirement? I don't think so. There are many, many ways your child could pay for college. Could go to a cheaper school, work study, take out a loan, lots of different things, scholarships, and so on. I don't think you want to sacrifice your financial future for your child's financial future. That's my opinion. Again, your goals may be different. Once you brainstorm, then you pick out a couple. You pick out a couple that say, okay, what can we realistically do this coming year? Maybe you can contribute the employer match, and maybe you can set aside 2 weeks of an emergency fund. Maybe that's what you can do for this year. I don't know. You write that down. Then at the end of the year, you look back and you see, how well did we do? You measure, how well did you do? Well, maybe you did meet the employer match because that was automatic. But maybe you only got 1 week of an emergency fund. So you didn't meet that goal. Okay, fine. That's not the end of the world. You set a new goal for 2022. You move forward. People who set a goal, write it down, measure how well they did, reset goals and start over again and keep doing that. Those are the people who are going to get where they want to go. The idea of listing all these goals is not to overwhelm you, is not to get you depressed. They're not easily accomplishable within the next year, 2 years, 3 years. It took my wife and I would say over 10 years before we created a 3-month emergency fund. It took us a long, long time. You want to make a little bit of progress every year. You want to set money aside. My wife and I always set money aside into a car fund, vacation fund, retirement fund. And we were deliberate about that. We said, look, we're going to commit to that. At the beginning of each month, we're putting money aside to those pockets, and we're not going to use it for something else. And that meant as time went on, we'd say, okay, well, we'd like to do this or do that. Well, do we have the money to do that? No, we don't. Well, we did have money in a car fund, in a vacation fund, in a retirement fund, but we're not taking money out of those pots because that's what those are for. And so that helped us keep our spending in check. We don't want to let your short-term spending defeat your ability to save for the long run, in particular, to save for retirement. That's why I started off by talking about fixed expenses, flexible expenses, trying to reduce spending to free up more money to meet these financial goals. Lastly, I want to say something about budgeting. Budgeting is probably a difficult thing to think about now in the middle of a financial crisis. But the better people are at with budgeting, the easier it's going to be to manage the next financial crisis. Now, if you're in really serious financial trouble, you may want to be talking to a credit counselor, a financial planner to give you more in-depth assistance and help in managing a significant personal financial crisis that you might be having. But I want to talk in general about the concept of a budget, explain a little bit about what it is, and hopefully make it easier for you to think about doing a budget. Most providers don't do a budget. Probably in my survey, as I recall, maybe about a quarter of the providers in the survey had a budget. I didn't have a budget for my wife and I until many, many years after we were married. A budget can help you meet these short and long-term financial goals that we've been talking about. The idea being that a budget will help you plan ahead so that any short-term emergency doesn't create as much of a problem because you've been keeping your spending under better control and are anticipating more accurately future fluctuations in your income. Again, this may be hard to think about now. It's something that maybe you can't deal with until this crisis has passed. And right now, if you're in the middle of a real serious crisis, your focus should be on keeping your expenses as low as possible. Question: if you are collecting Social Security and you start receiving IRA money, does it change your Social Security benefit? No. So your Social Security benefit is going to be based on the highest 35 years of earnings over your life. And once you decide to start collecting Social Security, except for annual Social Security cost of living increases, the amount you're going to get from Social Security will not go down. It'll go up. It'll never go down. So you start collecting Social Security and start earning money. Well, I need to clarify this. If you claim Social Security after your full retirement age, after age 66 or 67, it doesn't matter how much you earn. You can make $1 million, you can make $10, and it will not reduce or increase your Social Security benefit. If you start claiming Social Security before your full retirement age and work and earn more than that $18,900 number, your benefit will be a little bit lower. All right. But if you're taking money out of an IRA before your full retirement age, after your full retirement age, no matter how old you are in receiving Social Security, it will not decrease your Social Security benefit. So I made that more complicated answer because I talked about earning money. But in answer to your question, taking money out of an IRA has no benefit on your Social Security earnings, Social Security benefit. Doesn't matter. All right. Okay. The purpose of the budget is to help you meet both short and long-term financial goals. So what do? For 2021, you'd say, all right, we've listed some goals. We're prioritizing a couple. And so let's say one of them was setting aside, 3 weeks of an emergency fund. Well, how much is that? Well, that comes out to be, and I'm just going to make up a number, $1,200 a year. So that's $100 a month, okay? In order to reach that financial goal of contributing to our emergency fund, we need to save $100 a month. So you put in your budget $100 a month as an expense. And at the beginning of the month, you write yourself a check for $100 and put that into the emergency fund. You're putting that into the budget, which means that you have $100 less to spend on something else. A budget is simply a tool that helps you identify your income, identify your expenses. A budget is projecting your annual income for this year, projecting your annual expenses for the year. And then you break it down by month to say, this is our plan. This is how much we expect to get in March. This is how much we expect to spend in March. That's a budget. Are your actual income and expenses going to match exactly? No, no. And in the first year, you may be off. You'll probably be off by a lot because you haven't done the exercise before. Okay. Each year that you do a budget, it gets a little bit easier. In my opinion, if you start with setting a financial goal as the basis for establishing a budget, that's what makes a budget more interesting, more exciting. So you can see, hey, look, I'm saving money each month for my emergency fund or for my retirement fund. You can see the results month by month. One provider I was helping do a budget, she was laying out her expenses for the coming year, and she was making a truck payment, and her last truck payment was going to be June, and it was several $100s a month. So I said, okay, put in your truck payment for the first 6 months, and now for the last 6 months, you're not going to have that payment anymore. So what do you want to do with that money? And she said, I've always wanted to save for retirement. So I said, well, you could just put that same few $100s each month into retirement and just budget it. Instead of writing a check to the car company, you write a check to your own retirement. And she got very excited to see how she could start saving for her retirement. That's what I wanted to say. Caring for children is obviously your top priority. The non-financial rewards are more important to you than the financial rewards because of the career you've chosen. Some providers are never going to make a whole lot of money. Some providers are going to do very, very well financially. But success, happiness, is not directly related to how much money you have, right? I hope we all understand that. So it's not all about money. That's all we've been talking about tonight. Money, money, money. But it's not all about that. Whoops, where am I going? So here is my contact information again. I'm glad to try to answer your questions after tonight. And we got a couple more minutes to answer some questions. So here's another one. Question is, Joanna's asking in the chat box, would it be useful if you created a one-page side-by-side information sheet that describes each IRA? This would give you all the information in a way that would allow you to compare the different IRAs on one page. If you think that would be helpful, Joanna's asking you to respond in chat and saying whether you think that would be useful to you. And she's asking you to put your full name and email address. Make sure you put that in there into chat so that you can get credit for tonight's program. So take a look at chat and make sure you put your name and email and responding to the question about a chart that compares the IRAs. So if you have questions, you want to unmute yourself, you can ask that way or post your question in chat. speak up if you'd like to ask a question.
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you. Very good information to, get to your mind, start rolling because I was 42 and I need to start saving for my retirement. And this is very important.
Thank you. Yeah, it's never too late. Never too late to save.
I want to ask a question.
Go ahead.
What happens when you wanna save, but there's the other half of you that says no, don't save, you have to spend.
Don't listen to the half that says spend.
Don't listen.
Just say no.
Read some books, right?
Just say no. Well, look at it this way. Here's how I would say that. If you're tempted to spend money now, that means you're going to have less money later. So you have a lot of choice as to what kind of life you're going to live in retirement. You can expect to live about a fourth of your life in retirement. Do you want to be working after age 62, after age 67, after age 70? You may not be able to work as long as you want to because you have a very physically demanding job. So a friend of my wife's made over $100,000 a year, but she just spend. She didn't save anything. She retired early. She claimed Social Security early, but she kept spending. Now she's age 70 and she's working 30 hours a week in a liquor store because she can't live on Social Security. So delayed gratification is the way to go.
Okay, thank you.
Question, if you have a regular IRA, is it wise to move it to a Roth IRA? And I would say yes. If you're not speaking, if you could remember to mute your microphone, that'd be helpful. So you can roll over money that you have in a regular IRA into a Roth IRA. When you do that, you're going to have to pay tax on the interest that you've earned in that account. If you can afford to pay that tax out of your pocket and not out of the money that you're rolling over, then I think it's a good idea. Because then from now on, you'll never pay tax on future interest.
Great idea. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Tom,
Yes.
I wanted to know, like, look, I'm 52. Like, is it too late to start an IRA? Because I'm like, yeah.
No.
Same
It's
thing.
not.
52. How long do you think you're going to live? 82? That's 30 years. That's 30 years. So
Okay.
that's a long time to be saving money. So no, it's not too late.
It's just the point of getting started now.
You got to get started now. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. All right. That's all I wanted to know. Thank you. I really did enjoy this.
Good. You're welcome. Anybody else? Last call.
Yes, I got a question about budgeting.
Sure.
Before I would just write out like everything that had to be paid for the month.
Yep.
Against like what my income was.
Yep.
Now, on some like examples that I saw, it said to calculate the total of children that's in your care. Do you calculate the ones that you have or the maximum amount that you can have? Because if I calculate the maximum amount, that just doesn't sit right with me because that amount of money isn't there.
Correct.
So how can I use that money towards my expenses?
A budget is a projection of how much money you think you're going to get by the end of the year. It's not how much you could get. it's not your maximum enrollment. It's what you think, how many kids do you think you're going to have by the end of the year, towards the end of the year, right? And so you may say, I'm not going to be able to get any more kids than I have now. Okay, that's your budget of income. It's not how much you could potentially make. It's how much you estimate you will make. Does that help?
That was confusing. I'm like, and they didn't just sit right, because how can I calculate this amount of kids when I only have this amount of kids?
That's right. That's right. So you could start with a budget to say, I'm going to project that I'm going to have the same amount of money that I have now. I'm going to have the same amount of kids that I have this week for the rest of the year. That's one way to project a budget. Or you might say, I know I'm going to lose one child because they're going to be too old. Am I going to be able to fill that slot? I don't know. And if you're going to be optimistic, you'll say, I'll fill that slot. If you want to be pessimistic, you'll say, I'm not going to fill the slot. So that's how you're planning ahead, not by your maximum enrollment capacity. No.
Thank you. Great information as always.
Can't hear you now. All right. Anybody else? Anybody else? Okay. All right. I appreciate what everybody does.
Thank you. Good
Thank
night.
you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
You're
Good
welcome.
night.
Night, everybody. Good night, Maggie. She's a elected leader. What?